Oh, my novel. Well, I'm almost sort of kind of finished it. I just need that little lightning bolt of inspiration and it'll be completely done, I swear.
Welcome to Not Safe for Words. I'm your host, Crystal L. Kirkham, multi-genre author, editor, and cover designer. I'm here to give you insight into the world of publishing and to help you avoid the mistakes that others have made. So stick around, you're in for one hell of a ride where I don't curb the curses.
Before chronic pain reared its ugly head, I used to be a long-distance runner. And you're probably asking, what the fuck does running have to do with writing? And we're going to get to that in a second. But before I considered myself a long-distance runner, I got talked into doing my very first 10K, which is 10 kilometers. Don't ask me what that is in imperial because I don't want to do the math. I'm just going to be honest. Do not want to do the math tonight. And so this 10-kilometer run that I did, I was probably 240 pounds. I'm 5'10" for those who don't know, which is probably most of you. So, I'm a little on the overweight side. I don't really run. I didn't really train for it. And it was just a work thing that I got talked into. And I remember being most of the way done. There was a kilometer left maybe. And one of my coworkers just kind of saw me flagging and they said, "It's really not much further. I swear we're almost at the finish line. Come on, you can do it." And so I picked it up a bit and I started to jog. And then I walked a bit more and I jogged a bit more and I walked a bit more. And then all of a sudden I could actually see that finish line and I finished a 10-kilometer run-walk challenge. And sure, my time was terrible, but I did it. Little did I know way back then that one day I would end up running a half marathon. I would enjoy running 10Ks on the weekends and then one day have that totally taken away, but that's another story. And the reason why I'm talking about long distance running and that first time I ever ran a significant distance, or I should say mostly walked it, is because finishing can be really, really tough when you're writing a novel, especially if you've never actually finished a novel before, or you've never really finished a novel that you liked and wanted to continue on and edit. Which is what this episode is all about. And that's why I talked about this very first run I did, because I didn't think I was going to finish it. I honestly thought 1 or 2 kilometers or wherever I was from that finish line, that I was done. That I just wanted to call it quits and not bother finishing because it was just too much and too far. And I couldn't do it. I was exhausted. I was done. I was out of resources. Until I just had that one person who told me, it's really not that much further. You can do it. You can fucking do it. And I'm going to be honest, the same often goes when it comes to your writing. You might be lacking inspiration or motivation. You might understand, I know how to get to this finish line, but I can't seem to get my words to move forward. Or once again, back to lack of motivation is something called burnout, which if you work any sort of high stress job, you probably are very familiar with the term of burnout in terms of everyday life. And it can happen with your writing too. Burnout in everyday life can affect your writing, but your writing can also burn you out. And so this is a few things that we're actually going to talk a little bit about in this episode. All right. So the very first step is going to seem so stupidly simple that you're going to wonder why I'm telling you this, but sometimes it's the obvious shit that we forget to think about. And the number one thing is figure out why you're having trouble finishing. And don't always think that it's because the story isn't good or you've got too much on your plate, because for fuck's sakes, I worked 55 hours last week, still managed to write and submit a short story for publication. Sure, it was only a fucking short story. Yes, I spent most of the previous 2 weeks up to that deadline fucking blocked as hell on what to write because of burnout, overworking, too much on my plate, and I really didn't have the focus. The other thing, of course, is my ADHD. I work better knowing there's a deadline, so I wrote a short story on the day the deadline was due for this submissions call and got it edited and got it submitted in the same day during my 55-hour work week. So burnout, definitely a reason. Maybe just not feeling the story can be a reason, but why are you not feeling the story is what you need to consider at that point, especially because most of the time, if you're writing a fucking novel, you're already passionate about that novel. You started out excited and engaged and wanting to write the story. So what the fuck happened? Like, is it lacking of motivation for the story? And why are you lacking motivation for this story now? Is it inspiration? Are you just not inspired for the end? Did you not plan for the end and you just have no idea what the fuck is going to come next and you're waiting for that lightning strike to happen? Are you truly actually just exhausted and burnt out and just you have no more energy to give to anything else in your life, or you have no more energy to give to writing because you have written so much that you feel as though your well is dry? Or maybe you know what you want to write and you just can't figure out how the fuck to get this out on the page. So I'm going to stop here for a second and let you guys know that next episode we are going to talk about the differences between writer's block and writing burnout. But for now, the basic difference is writer's block means you often know what you want to write, you just can't get it out. Whereas writing burnout, your well is dry. You just cannot get anything out. You cannot even get the ideas or inspiration or motivation to put the words on the page anymore. So keep those basic definitions in mind as I talk about a few things you can do to get yourself to keep going. So what do you do in these situations? Well, in the case of writing burnout, there's two things you can do. You can switch projects and just find something that ignites your passion again and keep writing, or take a step back, give yourself a day, 2 days, maybe a week. It depends on what you have. I wouldn't recommend taking too much time off, and refill your well. Get some rest and relaxation. Take a few things off your plate and do something creative that isn't anything to do with your writing, and refill your well. So what if it's writer's block? What if it's just a general lack of inspiration on how to take things further, or a lack of motivation or interest in your story? So a few things that you can do here is, number one, invite somebody else into the process. I know I've said this a million times. Writing seems like a fucking solo process, but it really is not. You got to get yourself a good writing crew, at least one good friend who you can bounce some ideas off of, and preferably somebody who understands the creative process in writing and how to put a story together, because their input is absolutely invaluable. We all need somebody like that in our lives, that if we're no longer inspired or motivated by our story, then we can talk to them about it and find a way to rekindle our passion in that story if we can't find it by getting the passion on another story and then bringing that passion back into the story that we're trying to finish. And if inspiration is the issue, well, having someone to bounce ideas with and just go, this isn't fucking working for me. I don't know how to get to this ending. Nothing seems to go together. It's disjointed and horrible and I suck. By the way, you probably don't actually suck. That is just the gremlins in your brain. And so you have this other person who can go, well, let's just workshop some ideas. Let's bounce balls around this room until something sticks to a wall. And you're like, I got it. Eureka. There's my lightning strike. Except it's not really a lightning strike because you worked to build that momentum and build that energy and get that idea out. And that's where having somebody else to help you, somebody that you can trust, and more than one somebody if you can, to get this stuff done and help keep you on track and keep you accountable, or at least help remind you why you want to finish the story or give you ideas on how to finish the story. Which is why, once again, somebody who understands writing in the creative process is a really good person to have on your side and in your immediate circle of writing friends. Now, maybe you're like me and you find that you are absolutely crap without a nice, tight, solid deadline that you didn't make for yourself. Well, have a friend who can hold you accountable, but not just fucking accountable. Like, make sure that there is something that really keeps you on track. Like, it's not just an arbitrary, we've decided on this date and I'll feel guilty if I don't get it done. No, make it a real consequence if you need to. If that's what motivates you, going, well, crap, I told her I would not watch TV for a whole week if I don't fucking get the story done, and there is a new TV show starting that I am dying to watch. If that's what motivates you, do it, but make sure somebody holds you accountable and responsible for that goal. And this is why I always say writing's not a solo process. We really do need other people in our lives as writers to help us, because you know what? We're only fucking human, or at the very least, 3 cats in a trench coat. So those are a couple things that you can really do to help keep you on track or find the inspiration or the motivation. And of course, as I said, if you have to, take a break, but keep in mind the very basic rules of physics that you learn when it comes to motion. An object in motion stays in motion, an object at rest is more likely to stay at rest. And if you're like me and you take a really large break from writing, you find that you have a hard time getting back into it again. So do be wary of any sort of big break from writing unless you're somebody who really is more disciplined than some of us are. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think a lot of the writers I meet tend to be more along the neurodiverse line, and as opposed to neurotypical, and sometimes have trouble with a lot of that self-motivation, or maybe I'm just projecting and talking out of my ass on this one. Either way, you know what? Accountability can help any of us, even those of us who are good at staying on track. Sometimes just having that check-in helps keep you focused. So I went through a huge list of things that you can do in the last couple of minutes. Probably talking a little bit fast because it is really late at night here and I've had a shit ton of candy because it's almost Halloween. And sugar is apparently what keeps me going, along with caffeine these days with my 55-hour weeks. So now you know a few things that you can do. How do you know which one you should do? And this is where things get a little bit tougher, because you really have to sit back and analyze where you're finding the trouble in finishing. Because a lot of different sources can cause a lack of inspiration or motivation. You can honestly not have a good story and be unmotivated by the story itself because you've lost the passion of the story. There's nothing interesting in it for you as the writer. And perhaps that also means there's nothing interesting in it for the reader either. And it doesn't hurt to have an early alpha reader to go, hey, can you read this and tell me, what do you think? Like, how is the story flowing? Is it interesting? Is there anywhere I can pick it up? Is the pace lacking? Because sometimes getting that feedback as well can help re-inspire you on what to do. Or perhaps at that point, you might actually go back and cut a bunch of shit, condense it, and go over it and suddenly go, oh, I found the spark of the story again. It wasn't that it was a bad story. It's just that I took it in the wrong direction, and now I know how to fix that, and I can take it in the right direction, and that motivation and inspiration and excitement comes back to you in that case. So yes, sometimes the story is just not working, and that's why you can't seem to get it finished. But it can be really hard to figure out if it really is the story itself that is the problem. Because sometimes we've just gone over a story so many times in our own head that we're not excited about it anymore. Our brain has already finished that story, and we just want to move on to the next one because we're done. It's written in our brain, even if it's not on the page. And if that's the case, if you're like, you know what, this is still a really great story, but I'm just not motivated to write it, you know what, write the Cole's Notes version. Go right ahead, make brief notes on all the scenes you want to do, go find the passion somewhere else, and then come back to the story, and maybe you'll find the excitement in it again in that case. But don't just leave it, because once again, inertia. You've stopped the story, it's going to be harder to get it going. But if you've left yourself this fuck ton of notes that you can build on, and you have these ideas for scenes, and you're going to read one going, you know, Casey discovers that Tommy is cheating, if you're writing a romance or something like that. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, yeah, that was such a great scene. I should write this. Boom. You're back in the swing of things. But don't just leave it blank. Like, don't cut it off, because if you know what comes next, if you know what you wanted to do, it adds that little bit of a trigger for that spark of inspiration and motivation to keep going on your story. Now, if it is writer's block and you really want to write the story, you know where you want to take the story, you just don't know how to get it there or what to do next. That's the best point where you're going to workshop with someone, or you're going to make a decision tree where you go, well, if the character does this, what happens next, and what happens next, and what happens from there, and does that take me to where I want to go? And, to be fucking honest, you might end up deciding to go somewhere else if you do that. But if not, you also might find the right chain of events and sequences in your story. Go, that's it. That's how I get to where I want to be. These are the scenes I need to write. And even if you don't write exactly that, at least you've gotten yourself moving. Another great solution, if you want to write the story and you want to get somewhere but you just don't know how, just free write that shit, because editing exists for a reason, and that is because you know what, those stories aren't perfect to start. You do not write a perfect first draft, no matter how great of a writer you are, and that's just fine. Don't expect to. Do expect to edit, and do expect that you're going to have a few areas where you just write absolute shit that you're going to have to come back and edit. But at least it's written, and you're moving, and you're staying forward, and you might find yourself all of a sudden going, oh yeah, I know where I want to go from here. And then you can finish the story, and when you're editing it, because it's finally finished and you can edit it, you're going to be able to fix what you didn't write so well the first time. It's really not that difficult of a concept. Sometimes you just need to get through things, either over, under, or bust right down that brick wall like the fucking Kool-Aid man if you have to. Do what it takes just to get to the next scene, even if it's, something really fucking incredible goes here in square brackets, and then move on to a scene that if that's a style that works for you. Now, once again, writer's burnout, that's the thing where you're going to have to learn what works best for you, whether it's just keeping the momentum but on a different story, or just paring it back to, I only write 50 words a day, no more, no less, somewhere around there. I'm going to write that. And just pick away at it for a little bit until you feel like you can do it again. Or, once again, set yourself up for a break, but also set yourself a time to come back to it, where maybe you just go, okay, every Sunday for the next few weeks, I'll write like 100 words. No, it's not much, but it's 100 words more that you didn't have the week before. And that's perfectly okay. Nobody ever said you had to write every day and you had to mass produce these words. Nobody said that. Well, honestly, somebody fucking said that and they're wrong. It's as simple as that. They're wrong. It doesn't matter how you get to the end. You just have to get there. Because once you're there, you can write the end and then you can get on to editing, and that is a whole fucking topic in and of itself. But first, get that damn book finished. This has been another episode of Not Safe for Words. I hope you found some useful advice here today. If so, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can join me next time for more publishing and writing insights. Thanks for listening.